Um, this is a panel called "The Literary Works of Kyell," which is me, and so I'm going to do a reading. I think I need to get a little closer. Move my chair? That's crazy. So I'm going to read something that has not been published yet. I'm not sure what that's going to be, but I am in the process of figuring it out. And I will answer questions about the books. I'll talk a little bit. I mean, you guys tell me what books you want to hear about or what you're familiar with, or otherwise I'll just talk about the things that I'm working on this year and what I hope to see out next year and so on. So, let's see. I could read from the third Dangerous Spirits book, which is called Black Angel, which is going to be out next year, hopefully. I'm about halfway done with the first draft by now, so this would be first drafty stuff. What else can I write? What else do I have? I've got what is that? Oh, I don't want to read that. Let's see. I could read, how long is chapter 1? I could read chapter 1 of Black Angel, which would give you an introduction to the books if you have not read them, and a little bit of idea where things are going if you haven't, or if you have. Sorry, I said that wrong. So a little introduction. 2 years ago, 3 years ago I started writing. 2 years ago came out the first book in a new series called Dangerous Spirits, which was Green Fairy. Green Fairy was about a wolf in high school trying to get through the end of his high school year so that he could go live with his internet boyfriend. That turned out about as well as many internet relationships do, but he also had sort of a supernatural experience with it. I ended up liking the world and the people in the world, and so I wrote a second book which came out this January called Red Devil, which was about Saul's friend Alexei, who had fled his homeland of Siberia, which is my Forrester Universe term for Russia, because of abusive parents and a world that abusive attitudes towards gay people. And so, having written 2 books in the series, of course there had to be, since there were 3 main characters, there had to be a third book in the series. So the third book is called Black Angel, and it stars Meg, who is their otter friend. And I will start the book, which sort of kind of summarizes the previous 2, but hopefully without too many spoilers, and you can just sort of glaze over if you don't want to hear spoilers. Anyway, I'll just get started, and then questions and stuff later. Thank you guys all for coming in lieu of going to Kagi's Story Hour, by the way. I understand that's very, very fierce competition, so I appreciate the time. So, Black Angel, Chapter 1. Hi, I'm Meg. I'm 19, and I'm fucked up. That's not a big secret, by the way. Pretty much anyone who knew me from about 15 to now would tell you the same thing. Only back then, I thought it was a good kind of fucked up. Like, I was just tired of taking everybody's shit, and that's why I painted my fur black and got 7 piercings around my face. Sure, the high school would tell you I was fucked up, based on the 3 times I went to the principal to be sure I wasn't going to bring a gun in and shoot up the place. Of course, otters have the lowest rate of violent crime of any of the major species in this country, and you can look that shit up on the internet, only Mr. Bredkowski couldn't be bothered, so that's about as much weight as you should give his opinion. About the only friends I made in high school were a black wolf named Saul and a red fox named Alexei, an exchange student from Siberia. Saul played baseball until his senior year, when the pressure of being closeted fucked him up some and he got kicked off the team. Then in the middle of this project we were doing on the Bohemian painters in Lutece, he started having these dreams and thought a ghost was talking to him. He was pretty stressed about his online boyfriend, who turned out to be a fucking rapist, by the way, and about his dad and his baseball team and all. And he told me that the absinthe I got from my friend Athos led to those dreams, which was fucking ridiculous if you know Athos. But he got over that, and we all moved into an apartment in Vidalia, about an hour and a half away from our hometown. Not nearly enough. And Saul settled down with a job and a couple dates, but then Alexei couldn't get it together. His sister was back in Siberia with their abusive parents, and he had a crush on some guy here who some other guy wanted to bone. Boys are so uncomplicated. So he insisted on trying to summon Saul's imaginary ghost to help him out, and he dragged me into it. The ritual was completely bogus, but he thought it worked, so between that and his stress, he started having these dreams. Then he ran away downtown, and this Siberian bum followed him back, and Alexei went into shock, and when he woke up, he claimed that was his ghost. So you see, my two best friends don't have shit to say to me about being fucked up. But we all got along well enough. I mean, after Alexei's ghost deal, they stopped talking about ghosts around me. Saul believed Alexei, and even Athos believed them, but all of them knew I didn't buy it, so they just didn't discuss it. Still, in the 3 weeks since then, I blamed them for the creepy feeling I'd get walking down to the cafe, or on my way out of the pool, or just sitting alone in my room at night. Vidalia is a fucking sauna in August, so the pool's packed anyway, not to mention I have to choose between suffocating all night or listening to construction out behind our apartment building. Usually, I leave the window open, because that way I can sit on the windowsill and smoke a joint. If I don't blow the smoke out the window, my long-nosed roommates will wrinkle their noses the next morning, making sure I see it. So I wasn't all that upset that Friday morning when Saul's parents showed up to take him to college, because they were going to take Alexei with them to have his interview for a visa that would let him stay in this country. I was going to have the apartment to myself for 3 days, and hopefully with the Goosebumps Club away, I wasn't going to have any more of those over-the-shoulder creepy feelings. I heard the door open and the murmur of conversation outside. Sooner or later I was going to have to go out there to say goodbye to Saul, if nothing else. But I knew his parents didn't think much of me even when they thought we were dating, much less now that we were living together and not dating. So I lay on the futon mattress, no frame, I like being closer to the floor, and checked my email. 2 more requests had come in for me to draw them in a fantasy setting, one riding a unicorn and the other battling pirates on a ship. It was fine, easy stuff, even if the unicorn made me want to puke. I replied, letting them know it would be $100 each, and then went over in my head the drawings I had to get done this week. I'd started 2, and they'd be done quickly, and then I had 1 more, a boar who'd been referred by a couple friends and wanted to be an astronaut. Sure, whatever runs your motor. I'd have to do some research on spacesuits to get the details right, but that's what the internet's for. Then I pulled out my phone and looked at ScentBook to see if anyone there had recommended me to their friends, but nobody had. Eve and Alain from the coffee shop had gone out to a movie with Eve's girlfriend. A guy I'd drawn as a wizard last month was visiting his parents with his boyfriend. The usual blah blah of people's lives. Athos hadn't posted, but then he did about as often as I did. I dropped the phone next to my computer keyboard on the upside-down milk crate. The voices outside were louder now. I figured I couldn't put it off much longer. One old sweatshirt and a pair of black pants later, I cracked the door to my room open. All the wolves must have been in Saul's room, because Alexei sat by himself on the couch. The fox had his tail curled into his lap, and his paw on the bright new suitcase beside the couch, ears perked toward the bedroom he shared with Saul. But when I poked my head out of my room, the big black ears flicked my way, and his muzzle followed a moment later. "Good morning," he said in his Siberian accented voice. His English got better every week, but he kept the accent. Partly I think it was because there was a little Siberian community he hung out with, his friend Liza, his boss Vlad. but I think, too, he didn't want to lose the accent. "Mornin'." I slipped through and shut the door behind me. Our living dining room was not quite spotless, but the effects of Saul's frantic 2 days of cleaning did show. The scuzzy lime green carpet was mostly clear of fur, except for small pockets of red and black that collected against the couch legs and in the corners. The only marks on the dining room table were the scuffs and scrapes that couldn't be scrubbed out, the appliances likewise, and even the kitchen floor practically sparkled in the morning light from the little living room window. Mostly what I noticed was that the smells of cooking oil and fish had been replaced with a light, fresh pine, even though I'd sauteed a couple of tilapia fillets last night. Did Saul keep cleaning after I went to bed? Alexei grinned at me, showing his long canines. He was still cleaning when I fell asleep. I glanced toward the bedroom door. Couldn't see in from this angle, even though it was cracked open. Indistinct voices made their way through the plywood, just distorted enough to jumble the words. Did they say anything about it? He shook his head, his grin fading a bit. They said the apartment was cute. They were pleased that we have 2 beds. They asked if your room has a pool. Now they are arguing about Nikki. Christ. Did I mention Saul has a painting of a fox that he thinks is his ghost? Can't imagine why his dad doesn't want him taking a picture of a nude guy to college with him. Idiot. It is not, Alexei clicked his tongue. Sexual? Well, maybe not, but it is sexy. And unless he's planning on coming out from day one, it's not the kind of thing he should have. You think Nikki is sexy? He tilted his head. I think the painting is intended to be sexy. Alexei leaned back against the couch and nodded. This is what Saul's father says. I crossed to the dining room kitchen and sat down at the table. I ain't going to take his side too often, but this time he's right. From here I could hear scattered words, but still not as clearly as I'm sure Alexei could. I leaned in his direction. What else are they saying? He scowled, but focused his ears forward. Arguing about the painting still, he said in a low voice. He'd barely finished the sentence before I heard Saul snap, Fine! The door swung open and he stomped out, carrying his own suitcase. When he saw me, he paused, then kept on going to the front door, where he dropped the suitcase and slumped, all 6 feet of him, against the wall next to the door. His short black tail curled tightly around his leg, and he dropped his muzzle to stare down at his paws. Saul had sleek, naturally black fur that I would have loved in high school. No such luck being born an otter. And when I dyed my head, people thought it was because we were dating. Most wolves are loud, pushy assholes, not to generalize. Saul's a good guy, though. Hey, he said in a low voice as his parents came out of the bedroom. Alexei, you'll take care of Nikki, won't you? Of course. Alexei stood. Now Saul's bright green eyes flicked to me. And you'll take care of Alexei, right? He can take care of himself, I said before Alexei could object. He's got Mike now. Saul's eyes flicked to a point over my shoulder, just as his mother cleared her throat. Good morning, Meg, she said. You look nice today. She doesn't paint her fur first thing in the morning, Saul chimed in with a little smirk at me. His mom had made several comments to him about my fur coloring. I saw your mother at the store the other day. That I hadn't expected. I turned and met the eyes of the short gray wolf about my height, dwarfed next to Saul's big thug of a father. Didn't know you guys shopped at Nature's Fish, I said. She coughed. It was at the pharmacy? Figures Mom'd be getting drugs. I didn't say anything, and after a minute, Mrs. Wrightson went on. I told her we'd be coming here to pick up Saul, and she asked me to see how you're doing. and to tell you to give her a call. Yeah, I muttered, I will. She said you're going to art school in September? That's her plan, I said, without emphasizing her. You got everything? Saul's father said to him, cutting across our conversation. His mother kept talking to me. That's great, she said with a beaming smile. Art school sounds like so much fun. Hey, Saul said behind me, and he tapped me on the shoulder, so I turned. I thought at first he was just rescuing me from his mother, but he said, get on ScentBook already so I can keep in touch with you. It's just for canids, I said. What a stupid fucking name. All of the canids in the room flattened their ears, and I remembered too late that I probably shouldn't curse in front of Saul's parents. Oh well, their problem. It's for everyone now, Saul said patiently, probably because he didn't want to call me the name he did the last time I sounded off about ScentBook. That ain't a selling point. You want me to get on so Marcia and Allison can make stupid comments on my profile? Who from high school is so friggin' important that I need to give them another way to rag on me? His green eyes flashed. There's me. Yeah, well, use email like a normal person, I pointed. Alexi doesn't use ScentBook. I am going to, the fox said with a treacherous smile. I shook my head. Fine, then I'll just tell him to post updates. Now let's get the goodbyes over with before your parents shove you out the door. His mother, behind me, said, we have plenty of time. But his father hefted the large suitcase he was carrying between me and Alexi, setting it next to Saul's at the door. All right, Saul said, but stay in touch. He reached out with both arms. Inwardly, I sighed, and I let him see my annoyance, but he didn't care, just smiled. So I stepped into the hug and kept it as short as I could. Don't go fucking changing in college, I whispered into his ear, hopefully low enough that his parents wouldn't hear. I'm gonna miss you too, he said, and he was grinning as he stepped back. Alexi stepped toward me then, and I swatted him away. You I'm gonna see in 3 days, I said as he laughed. Kick ass on that interview. Saul's mother clucked, but his father didn't seem to care. Come on, he said. It was nice to see you, Meg, Mrs. Wrightson said, as the guys all picked up the bags. Are you going to have any company over while the boys are gone? Even other people's mothers couldn't stop asking me about my dating life. No, I said, no guests. I couldn't tell whether that pleased or worried her. She just gave me a small smile and said, call your mother, all right? Sure, I said. I kept my paw up as the 4 of them filed out the front door. Saul gave me one look back, his green eyes bright in the dim hallway. I stood in the front door watching as they walked down the hallway, tails still except for Alexi's long, wagging white-tipped one. And then the 4 of them were just silhouettes against the sunlight of the glass door at the front of the building. I stepped back into the apartment and let the door close. Finally, I exhaled. The apartment, slightly crowded with 3 people, felt palatial with just me. First thing I did was check that their fan was on, blowing out. It was, and that was all I'd intended to do in that room, but I stopped to look up at Saul's painting. His dresser was closed, so I couldn't see it was empty. The desk he and Alexi shared still had Alexi's stuff on it. His bed, though, was bare of the dark blue sheets and missing its pillow. So I stopped to look at it, thinking about how maybe I would set up another ScentBook account, with my real name this time, just to talk to Saul and Alexi on. I could ignore everyone else if I had to. And then my eyes just drifted up to the painting. It was a pretty good painting, and Saul's parents had gotten a nice framing job on it. The composition and color in the park scene was really nice, bright fall colors that complemented the fox's reddish fur. He was nude, but his back was to the viewer, and you couldn't even really tell he was male, except that 100 years ago, nobody was painting flat-chested vixens. Also, His hips weren't quite wide enough, although you could have put that down to the artist being more comfortable with leaves and trees than foxes. His tail flowed like the way vixens' tails were traditionally painted, slimmer and longer and more curvy than their male counterparts' tails. But again, that might have been the artist saying something about his subject. Saul thought that he knew the painter, a black rat named Henri Trou-Noir, who'd at least existed according to the internet. The fox, who was rising from the stone bench with his head turned over his shoulder to show one bright green eye, was not documented anywhere on the internet. And in fact, this painting wasn't credited to Trou-Noir either. But Saul had dreamed about it and was convinced that the fox in the painting was Nicky, a gay Siberian fox who'd somehow befriended him despite being dead for 100 years. I hadn't seen the painting since Alexei brought it into my room to try to summon Nicky, and that had flamed out spectacularly. And then I hadn't been paying a lot of attention to it. I had to give it to the artist, though. He'd captured something in the subject and the pose that made you linger, watch the painting to see if the fox would continue to rise. That kind of suspended motion was something I wasn't good at yet. I could do relatively decent pin-ups, but this, no matter what I thought of the subject, was art. My fur prickled slightly. Ah, no. I was not going to get that creepy feeling again, not with the boys gone. I stomped out of the room and shut the door, and then opened it again, feeling like an idiot. What, closing the door so the ghost couldn't get out? Was I fucking 15 years old again? I hurried back to my room. Regardless of whether I felt creepy or not, I wanted to get down to the cafe. I had some commissions to work on, and it was a nice enough day out. If I got my work done quickly, I could run over to the pool, although on Friday afternoon, it was going to be packed. And that's chapter 1. So there are hopefully not too many spoilers for people who hadn't read the others, and enough indication of the story to make it interesting. Do you guys have questions or things for me to talk more about, or anything to ask? Please, don't be shy. Ask. Ask something. Otherwise, I don't know what to talk about, or I'll just talk about things I'm writing now.
What are you writing now?
What am I? All right. So I microphone. I just finished a novella called Dude, Where's My Fox, which is extremely adult. That will be coming out at Rainforest at the end of September and available on furplanet.com and on electronic formats on baddogbooks.com shortly thereafter, and then on all the major ebook sites shortly after that. I am currently writing Black Angel, which I'm up to 57,000 words, which is 17. Well, I'm on chapter 17 right now. So there's a lot of that happening. I'm working on what's uppermost in my folder. I am working on a novelette length story to send to submit to Hot Dish. So they're open for submissions again. That's for longer adult stories. It's about this story is about 13,000 words. They're looking for things like 10 to 15, 10 to 20 maybe. So deadline for that is end of September. So I'm still polishing that to get that in. Working on a few scattered short stories. Working on a novella that I can't talk about because the subject of the novella is a spoiler for the 5th Out of Position book. Working on the 5th Out of Position book. That the first draft of that is finished. It came in at 110,000 words or so, which would be the shortest of all the books if it remained that length, which it won't. So that one is on my agenda. Also going to be working on editing Camouflage, which was my posting as I wrote it online story from last year. It's still up online. I'm going to give it a polish. What's today? Thursday? Is today Thursday? Okay. So 2 days ago, I was walking around the real city on which the fictional city that Camouflage takes place in was based, and looking at all of the monuments that actually exist in this city and how badly I mangled the descriptions of them in my fictional story, and taking pictures and posting it so everybody could share in them and laugh at me. And if you search for the Twitter tag Camouflage Tour, you will find all of my entries on that subject. There's about 20 of them. And if you don't know the story, you can see some pretty pictures of Lyon. So there you go. So I'll be editing that. I'll be editing the 5th Out of Position book. I will be writing the rest of Black Angel and editing that. I've got a cupcake to come up with for next year, which I sort of think I know what I'm going to do, but I'm not 100% sure. And I have a young adult series that I'm thinking of working on, which I'm more excited about now after being at Worldcon last week and talking about all the cool stuff going on in the young adult field. So I may get started writing that this fall. But yeah, actually at the moment, first drafting, I'm only working on Black Angel and this other thing which is sort of kind of going on in the background of all the other stuff that I'm working on. And by the way, speaking of young adult stuff, if any of you guys are interested in non-furry or tangentially furry young adult stories, I have, under my other name, a story in this young adult collection which was themed around diversity in young adult fiction. And so there's just all kinds of, because the idea was there aren't enough young adult stories featuring protagonists that aren't basically white and straight and fully abled and whatever else people feel most comfortable with. So there's trans characters, there's disabled characters, there's all kinds of different races, gay, queer, all kinds of other protagonists, and I've read through the collection and it's pretty fabulous. So even if you don't want to read my story, it's still a cool collection to pick up. And I have a bunch of cards left over from Worldcon. If you guys want one, I will have them up here. Is that enough? What else am I working on, Kit? What else am I working on, Kit?
The garage still needs cleaning.
Okay, I'll be cleaning the garage. Yeah. Oh, and audiobooks. Although I keep forgetting about the audiobooks because I'm not actually doing much work for them, but we're still working on getting the getting Divisions out as an audiobook. As I've mentioned a couple times, basically the ACX rejected it for technical reasons, and then when we tried to fix it, they said, you fixed it badly, and so Savern is having to record the entire thing over again, which makes me feel really bad, but it's the only way we could really do it. Divisions Waterways is still, the guy keeps pinging me periodically and saying, I'm still working on it, I intend to get this done, so I believe it will be done someday. And the Mysterious Affair of Giles is also being worked on by Husky Tear, who is a woman with a British accent, so it's perfect for an Agatha Christie mystery with a female protagonist, and I've heard her first sample of it and it sounds awesome, so I'm very excited about that one coming out. And Kit was making hand gestures at me that I didn't interpret properly.
I think you have a couple comic projects?
Comic projects. I do have comic projects. I've been writing a bunch of comic scripts, but most of them, a lot of them are just short things where I was talking to an artist and they said, I would love to do a comic. And I said, I have an idea for one. And then I wrote an idea and gave it to them. And they have not drawn it yet. So I don't know if they will ever come out, where they will come out, or anything like that. I'm collaborating with someone on a project for Heat. So, but again, we're going to submit it. We don't know if it'll be accepted. And I have completed the script for a graphic novel, which ended up taking a lot longer than I thought it was going to because writing comic strips is hard, and the artist for that also got caught up in the middle of a bunch of other stuff, but I'm collaborating with Kyell again, so she's very excited about it. As soon as she gets back from Burning Man, she will probably get to work on it. And the last collaboration I did with Kyell, which was the comic that we did for Erica Moen's site, Oh Joy Sex Toy, which was about furries and sexuality, and furry not being just about sex, but sex being a part of what you use to discover your identity, which is what furry is about. Just for some reason got revived again by Upworthy and then mentioned on the Huffington Post, so people have been sort of sending me notes like, I saw you on the Huffington Post, it's so cool. So that was interesting. So that was like making my Twitter feed go boom in the last few days. It always happens when I'm out of the country with that comic. So anyway, I think that might be all of the things that I'm doing. Maybe. I feel like there's probably more. But, okay, next question.
Quite writing related, but what's the schedule of Unsheathed? Will you be doing one?
So Unsheathed went on brief hiatus for the full episodes because they were sucking down all of Kit's time, and then KM and I started doing the live stream episodes, which was working pretty well for a while, and then KM went on hiatus, and so I was trying to keep doing them, but without someone else to spur you to be like, hey, we should do an episode or a regular schedule or anything like that. It was a lot harder, and I didn't want to do them on my own because I didn't want to just sit there and blab at a computer for half an hour. Because, you know, obviously you guys can see how much I hate sitting in front of a group of people talking continuously for 45 minutes or whatever. But Tube or not Tube or Ryan Campbell, however you know him, I'm revealing his secret identities, has been excited about participating with me. We just had a problem because this year I've been traveling like every other month, and so the summer was really interesting because for the first 2 weeks of June I was gone at a workshop, and then as soon as I got back, he left for a 6-week writing workshop, and then as soon as he got back, I left to be in Europe for 2 weeks. So the state of Unsheathed is that it's on summer break, and this fall we will pick it up again. KM is talking about kind of easing back into things. I don't know if that includes Unsheathed or not, but hopefully we can at least get him to show up now and then. But yes, it's not gone.
What's the start to finish process of preparing a novel, and is there any different from that when you do a novella like say science fiction or video games?
So the question was, what's the process start to finish on a novel, and is it any different from a novella? It's the main difference is in scale, so the size of the project. For a novel, what I usually do is write the first draft all the way through without thinking too much about it. I can't turn my editor all the way off, but I can turn it down to like 2 or 3 from 10. And I can get through a first draft. I write that through. That takes me anywhere from 2 months to 5 months, depending on the book. I pushed myself because I knew I was going to this workshop in June, and so I got the 5th Out of Position book done in like 2 months, which was crazy fast. Green Fairy took 2 months. The combined Divisions Uncovered marathon project took like 7 months or something crazy. So I do that. I let it sit. So Uncovered actually ended up sitting for like almost 2 years because I took the first half of it and then I made a book out of it, and that process took like another year. And then I waited a while, and then I went back to the second half and pulled that out and made that a different book. But usually it's anywhere between 2 and 6 months, depending on how long I have to process the novel. I push it out of my mind, I go away. And then bring it back, and I'll spend a month to a month and a half reading through it and trying to summarize it and looking at where there are major flaws in the structure, where the plot needs to be fixed. I'll do a little bit of editing, word polishing at that point, but usually it's just structurally. I'll look at it and I'll say, man, these 6 chapters in the middle are really boring, how can I get rid of them? Or, wow, it just jumps right from this point to this point, I need another scene in there. And then I fix the edits, then I send it around to my writing group for first round of feedback. They get back to me, I go through another edit on it, send it around to a secondary writing group for more feedback, go through, and at that point I'm doing mostly minor edits, minor touch-up, and then I read the whole thing aloud, as I just did with this chapter, but I do it for the entire novel, and that helps me fix the way the sentences sound. It helps me fix unintentional repetition, which you heard a little bit of in this first draft, where I wasn't fixing it on the fly, but there were a couple points in there where I was like, must fix later. Nothing super egregious, but there were a couple times where I was just like, I used couch like 5 times in that sentence, in that paragraph. And then it goes to the publisher, and they do a copy edit on it, and then I get the copy edit back, and I review their copy edit, and then it goes back to the publisher, and then they put it on paper and sell it to people. For a novella, it's kind of the same but shorter. So The Mysterious Affair of Giles and Dude, Where's My Fox were both written in 2 weeks, and actually they were written in consecutive 2-week periods, because I wrote the one in a marathon, and then I was like, I need to read something, I need to write something else, and so I wrote that something else. So Giles sat for about 6 months, and the other one sat for probably about a year before I picked it up and went back through it again. Giles was pretty tight from the get-go, because what I did for that one was I wanted to write an Agatha Christie type story. So I picked up, well, I had a couple, and then there's like 6 or 7 that you can find free on the internet through various sources. And so I read like 6 of them in a week. And so then my head was all like, this is what an Agatha Christie novel looks like, and then I just wrote. So it was pretty solid, and I didn't have to do too much to it. Mostly it was just clarifying things. The other one, the structure, I kind of lost track of it, and so I had to pull out the last scene and replace it with, well, I had to pull out the last 2 scenes and replace them with 2 other last scenes. But generally it was pretty good. So the editing was much shorter on that. I really only sent both of those around to my writing group for like 1 pass, and then just went through and fixed things myself and did copy editing on them and sent them out. So it was all much shorter, and it's not just because it's fewer words. It's because the structure of a novella is less complicated than the structure of a novel. It's less to keep in your head all at once, and it's easier for me to spot the flaws in it during that first editing pass when I'm going through, as opposed to a novel where I can go through and, you know, for example, there's stuff as I'm rereading chapter 1 here, I'm on chapter 17 now, and there's stuff that's in chapter 1 where I was like, oh yeah, I forgot I wrote that. That was a thing. I kind of made up something different later on. So I have to, you know, things that I have to fix and reconcile. There's a lot more of that in a novel than there would be in a novella. I hope that answers your question. Seems like a lot of words. Anyone else? Yes.
I'd like to know, why do you think like furry scenes is very deep fiction and this LGBT topic do work so well together? I mean, you can all tell it does, but why do you think does it work so well?
Why do furries and LGBT fiction work well together? They're both things that are, to different degrees, not well understood outside of the communities. They are both things that are not obvious on the surface as you're walking around, unless we choose to make them obvious, which we do in different ways. And they're linked sort of, so as I said, the furry comic strip that I did with Kyell was sort of talking about how furry is, for a lot of people, not necessarily everyone, but what I think it ends up being for a lot of people is a kind of journey of self-discovery. And a lot of people, I think, don't set out to do it. Like, you don't say, I'm going to join the furry fandom and find myself. You just kind of say, hey, this furry thing is a lot of fun, and you end up surrounded by a lot of people who are very comfortable with who they are, and who are very accepting of who they are and who everyone else is. And it's very difficult in that setting to continue to hide things from other people in that community. And so you end up being much more open about things. And the interesting thing, the very funny thing is, I'm gonna tell a story that relates to a point, but the choosing of a persona, I think, is very important to the fandom, even though a lot of people seem to do it casually, but I don't think it is. When I was at Comic-Con, and one of the guys from Penny Arcade approached us and said, hey, this furry stuff we've heard about, it's kind of weird, but you guys are all doing it. And we had a brief email conversation after that, and he said, so the one question I have is, why is your icon that of the beast? And he said beast, which is an interesting word that we don't use that much because it has these negative connotations. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, that's like the core of being a furry. Why do you represent yourself with this animal person? Why are we all wearing these badges that represent ourselves as whatever our animal is? So I think what you choose about your animal says something about yourself to the community, and in that way, that sort of openness, being gay is really the other big thing right now that people are open about in closed communities and not so much outside them. And they seem to be linked in a lot of places, and it's probably just the things that I write. So I get letters from a lot of gay young people. Why is it linguistically that you would say gay teenagers, but you would say young gay people? If I say gay young people, it doesn't sound right. There's a whole article on like the order of adjectives and how there's this actual like syntax to the order of adjectives that we unconsciously understand. But anyway, I get letters from a lot of people saying, "Oh, I told my parents that I'm gay, but I don't want to come out to them as furry." Which honestly, I did that too. I came out as gay before I said I was furry to my family, and in fact, my family, I think one of the big indications they had is about how furry I/we am and are is when Kit and I were planning our wedding, and we had a sketch from a friend that was a super cute little sketch of our wolf and fox characters like dancing and having fun, and we were like, that would be a cute thing to use as a save the date. We'll just send that out as a save the date, and we don't need our wedding to be furry. And our wedding planner was like, this is awesome. You have to do more stuff. Do you have more stuff with these characters? You should do more with them. You should do more things. They should be in the wedding. You should be on the invitations. They should do all this thing. And we were just like, really? You think? Because it turns out that wedding planners plan the same wedding over and over and over and over again. And we kind of figured that out from the weddings that she was showing us that she was proud of. They were all these weird exotic things. Someone had a wedding like out on a little island with all these paper lanterns that was gorgeous, and someone else had this all blue crystal silver thing. But even someone had an under the sea wedding, and we were like, that's cool. And she's like, Yeah. So, so there was a lot of furry stuff at our wedding, and our family was kind of into that. My aunt lives near Anthracon, and I was out for Anthracon the last 2 years, and she said, "We keep seeing this wolf and fox on the news, and we were wondering, is that you two?" And we were like, "No, it's not us, but thank you." So. So yeah, so for me too, the coming out as furry came out after the gay thing, because I guess, my family needs to know that I'm dating a guy because I want to bring him around to family events, but they don't need to know that I'm a fox unless I put it on our wedding invitations. But I was glad we did. I mean, it ended up being cool, and it's something that was a part of our lives, and everyone seemed to think it was super neat and appreciative. So, I don't know. That was just a lot of rambling. I hope that there was an answer somewhere in there to your question. Okay. We're like at 8 o'clock. I'm willing to sit here and answer questions as long as people want, or talk about stuff. Anything else people want to talk to? I have to, Kit. It's my job. Kid is hungry, I know. Hungry wolf in the back of the room. Anything else you guys want to ask? I know normally when I do conventions, I'm either, well, that's not true. Normally when I'm doing conventions, I have like lots of time in the dealer's room, and so I say, don't come and bother me after panels to sign books, because find me in the dealer's room, because we're trying to get out of the room for the next panel, and so on. But here at Eurofurence, they have a very civilized half hour between panels, and also I'm not in the dealer's room that much. I'll be there tomorrow from 3:30 to 6, and I'll be there Sunday from noon to 3, I think. Saturday from noon to 3. And otherwise I'll be hanging out in the bar. If you guys want to come chat, or you've got books that you want signed, or whatever, or if you have stuff that you want signed now, come on up, and I'll be happy to do it. I usually have my pens with me so I can sign things, and again, so if there's no more, Kit has a question. What's your question, Kit?
So I think you wrote a song for Fox More in his last album. What was the experience of writing a song versus no prose and some of the other stuff?
Oh my God, it was so hard. No, I mean, it's, people laugh, because it was like, what, 100 words, if that, 50 words? I don't know. So yeah, so Fox More very, very kindly asked me to write lyrics to a song, because he wanted to do this collaborative project. And I was super excited about that, because I thought, hey, I've screwed around with song lyrics before, I've done the thing where, like, I could be Weird Al if I was 10 times more talented, and but then he was just like, okay, here's the music for the song, but the melody wasn't there. And so I was just like, how am I writing this? Am I imagining the melody? So I had to time it out to the song, and then I had basically this sort of blank verse that I had to fill in. And eventually what I did was wrote down a bunch of nonsense syllables that I thought would fill in the verses properly, and then tried to figure out what I wanted the song to be about. There's a great segment of This American Life, if any of you listen to the podcast, thisamericanlife.org. There was a show they did recently on breakups, and one of the segments is about a woman who decided that she wanted to write a pop song after her breakup. And so she's going to these people talking about how to write pop songs. So there was a little bit of advice from them, and they said, don't try to be too clever and don't try to be too wordy in your songs. And I thought, this is the wrong job for me, clearly. But there are people who are clever and who are wordy in songs, and so I thought it could succeed. But yeah, so I had to write the verses. It was essentially like writing a very strict form poem, which I'm also not very skilled at or used to. And so I would sit there for like literally 2 hours and come up with 8 words. and which was very frustrating to me because I'm used to coming up with 2,000 words in an hour, and it's sort of similar to writing comics in that way, because comic scripts you have to think about like the whole panel that you're doing. You can't just be like, then the character said this and did this, then the character said this and did this, because you have to think about this is a beat, this is a whole scene, and you have to pack each panel with as much information as you can, but not too much information, because you don't want the panel full of word balloons, and you want each kind of step of the thing to be separate. So anyway, you're like storyboarding in your head as you're writing, which is also frustrating. But the song was ultimately it was successful, I think. Fox really liked the lyrics. Coulson came over to talk with me about them, and he said, oh, I'll probably have to make a bunch of changes to the words and this and that, and he couldn't figure out how to sing them with the song. And I was like, you're the guy who makes music. But then he came over, and I kind of told him how I was envisioning. There was like one part of the song that I had been like, this is how it goes in my head, and I kind of sang that for him, and then he was like, oh, well, I don't have to do anything now. And then it was all set. And Fox he did an amazing recording, and Fox made the song sound beautiful, and people liked it. So that was very rewarding. And I've told Fox that I would be happy to work with him on more songs in the future. So maybe it will happen.
How do you develop the character? Do you have when you start writing a novel, do you have a complete character in your mind, or do you make it up on writing that?
So the question is, how do I develop the characters, and do I have them all complete in my head when I start a novel? I don't. In fact, I have. One of the reasons I go back and edit is because I put things in at the start of the novel when I'm still trying to figure out exactly who these characters are, and they are revealed later over the course of the story, so I end up having to go back to the beginning to smooth out things and say, oh, this isn't really true to his character now, or stuff like that. There's one of the things that's interesting about writing novels is you think you know what your story is when you start writing the novel, but you don't. You don't know what your story is until you're done writing the novel. And then you have to go back and make the rest of the novel match the story that you're now telling with the novel. And the same sort of goes with characters. I'm writing a lot of sequels recently, which is, I want to say, kind of a new thing for me to be mostly writing that. But that means that I have established characters from the beginning. With the Dangerous Spirit series, it's a new character each time, but I still sort of know them. With the Devon Lee series, man, the reason I was able to write that last novel in 2 months is because I know those characters so well, and it was basically, here you go, here's a situation, I know how you guys are going to react to this. And I'm still discovering a few things about them, but mostly they're very, very solid in my head, and I love writing about them. So it gets easier if you have the opportunity to write more stories about characters. But I think even they have changed, and people would probably agree that they have changed from the first book to the fourth. So they've evolved in my head as they've been going along. But yeah, if I'm starting a new book, I have a pretty good overall sense of the characters, but little things always come in to change who they are as I write the book.